He was the most powerful man in Europe. He had never lost a war. And in the summer of 1812, he led over 600,000 men, the largest army Europe had ever seen, into Russia. But just 6 months later, barely 100,000 returned. What happened wasn't just a military defeat. It was one of the greatest disasters in history. His men weren't destroyed by bullets. They were starved, frozen, abandoned. Victims of cold, disease, and a plan that collapsed under its own ambition. This is the story of Napoleon's invasion of Russia, a moment where the tide of European power turned and the emperor's dreams froze in the snow. By 1812, Napoleon Bonaparte ruled over a vast empire. From Spain to Poland, his armies had defeated nearly every major power in Europe. But one rival refused to bend: Russia. Tsar Alexander I had once agreed to an alliance, but tensions grew after Napoleon imposed economic sanctions against Britain. Russia refused to comply, undermining the French-led continental system. Napoleon saw it as betrayal. So, he made a decision that would change history. He would invade. In June 1812, Napoleon launched the French invasion of Russia with the Grande Armée, an enormous force of over 600,000 soldiers from across Europe. The goal: advance rapidly, force a decisive battle, and bring Tsar Alexander to the negotiating table. But from the start, the campaign did not go as planned. Russia refused to fight directly. Instead, the Russian army retreated, drawing Napoleon deeper into the country, stretching his supply lines, and burning everything in their wake. It was a tactic of scorched earth: deny the invaders food, shelter, and resources. Napoleon advanced, but every step forward cost more men. In early September, Napoleon finally got the battle he wanted. Near the village of Borodino, west of Moscow, the French and Russian armies clashed in the bloodiest single day of the Napoleonic Wars. Over 70,000 casualties were recorded. Napoleon won a narrow victory. The Russian army retreated. And on September 14th, Napoleon entered Moscow, the heart of the Russian Empire. But instead of surrender, he found a ghost city. The Russians had evacuated and then set the city on fire. Napoleon waited 5 weeks in the ruins of Moscow, hoping for peace negotiations. None came. With winter approaching and supplies vanishing, he had no choice. In October, Napoleon ordered a retreat. That's when the nightmare truly began. The Russian winter arrived early. Freezing temperatures, snow, and icy roads turned the retreat into a death march. Soldiers froze overnight. Horses collapsed in the snow. Starvation set in. Clothing rotted. Ammunition was abandoned. Russian forces harassed them at every turn, picking off stragglers and disrupting retreat routes. What was once the greatest army in Europe was now a broken column of starving, freezing men. By the time they crossed back over the Berezina River in November, they had lost nearly everything. Of the 600,000 who marched in, only a fraction made it out. Some estimates say just 10,000 troops returned to fight again. The invasion of Russia was a turning point. Napoleon's reputation for invincibility was shattered. His empire began to unravel. Within 2 years, a new coalition of European powers would drive him from the throne. And the disaster left a lasting legacy, a brutal lesson in overreach, logistics, and the dangers of hubris. Napoleon's invasion of Russia wasn't just a military defeat. It was the unraveling of a dream. The dream of total domination, stopped not by a rival general, but by weather, distance, and time. In the end, it wasn't a battle that ended his empire. It was winter. If you liked this story, check out our video on the Mongol invasion of Japan, where an unstoppable fleet was destroyed by a typhoon. Please subscribe and tell us in the comments, which historic subject should we cover next? Thanks for watching.